Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our session right now, one of the satellite sessions, session 3 of TEDx Littleton Women. We're so excited as we frame in these satellite sessions critical conversations that help us navigate resetting, reframing a better future. And part of these conversations that you are in today is looking at local and global value chains. We're going to land in the room in TED style delivery, thought leadership by each panelist who will be sitting with us today. And each of those conversations are going to last approximately 7 minutes. And what they will be framing basically in their conversations is a perspective on what it is that needs to happen and change in terms of local and global value chains. Now, we are aware that as a result of the global pandemic that is COVID-19, local value chains, particularly dependent on international, multinational value chains, were highly compromised. There's a conversation in there that speaks to resilience as well as being able to respond to emergencies. Very significantly, African value chains, and even more significantly, value chains where women in particular are participating, were significantly compromised. In this session, we're going to be framing one conversation that is looking at what about our local value chains that we need to be thinking about differently. When we set the conversation as pathfinders and connectors, part of the conversation was about finding new ways of doing things and creating new pathways where the existing ones did not exist, where the existing ones were not relevant or were not adequate. And in finding pathways, we need to reset the conversation on local and global value chains to ensure that the focus that we will be recreating is one that benefits everybody. Of interest, particularly in this conversation, is a realization that particularly the agriculture value chain is one we need to be paying attention to. This is said to be growing to an estimated $1 trillion in the near future. And often, when we hear about agriculture value chains, we often hear about the labor force, which is predominantly women. We hear a lot less about women's participation in terms of the dollars spent that ends up in the pockets of African women. We posit that Africa cannot proceed without half of its population economically active and engaging prosperously. Now, to frame this conversation a bit better, we're taking multiple tones and perspectives from people who are participating quite significantly in this field and can shape a narrative that allows us to have multiple dimensions to this conversation. Up front, we're going to have Ms. Jean Chawapiwa, who's a strategic communications expert with more than 25 years of corporate communications experience. Now, this experience particularly landed her in spaces where we've been engaging with her, particularly where we've been seeing the work that she's done with We Connect International South Africa, connecting South African women to global value chains. We're intrigued as to what the success story of this is and also what lessons can be learned, and whether these models that are implemented by global multinationals are relevant in the local space, as we particularly have an interest in the intra-African free trade area and what that means for unlocking opportunities and unlocking collaboration opportunities for African women in business. Jean, I'd like to take this time to please welcome you to the stage and give us a perspective on local and global value chains.
Hoping you can hear me well. I'm just going to make sure my presentation is fully visible. Is it fully visible? Okay, I was told there's a bit of a delayed stream, so hopefully we'll catch up. Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning wherever else you were. Thank you very much for Womenomics and for inviting us on this very important discussion, resetting global and local value chains. So We Connect International is a global organization. We work with members who currently sit at over 110 members who are members of We Connect International globally. These are members who are looking for women-owned businesses for their supply chain. And at We Connect International, we've been very focused on finding diverse women owned businesses, from the small to the large, and really helping them to connect with WeConnect International members. We want our women business owners to scale. And the theme of our conference this year, which happened just before COVID, was actually focused on scale. And COVID came along and turned everything upside down. But that doesn't mean that we're no longer wanting women to scale. We want them to scale. Even with the compromise that's happened with COVID, I think it's allowed us to rethink some of the game, the businesses that we've been doing, and link with more members. One of the things that's happened during this time is that WeConnect International, the head office in Washington, has actually had more corporate members approaching them saying, during this time, we really need to seriously work together to find more women-owned businesses. So that's been exciting to actually have corporates coming to us and helping us to rethink how we go forward, helping them to rethink how they go forward. So we have corporate members. Of course, everything is not rosy. We have a large number of our members who are setting serious targets about how they're going to buy from women-owned businesses and what they're going to buy from women-owned businesses. And we need to step up on our side and find those women, encourage them to scale, encourage them to go for the opportunities, and to understand the value chains. Often with women, we don't understand the value chain that the corporate is involved in or that we're getting into ourselves as a business. So we want to make sure that we have strategic thinking about our business and where the business is going. In South Africa, we're working currently with over 24 members that are interested in South Africa and finding women business owners. And we want to continue to engage with them and find their needs. So we're often asked for women in logistics, women in engineering, women in telecoms, women in packaging. This year, we've been asked for women in retail. Agriculture is coming up more and more and more. Recently, we had a new member, Corteva, who are in agriculture, and they want to find women who own land and can be involved in agriculture. So we identify, register, and certify women-owned businesses, women that are serious about being in business. And as I said, they want to scale and find opportunities. Any woman that's listening now who's not on our database, they can easily register. It's very easy to connect. You can get on the database. So what's been the key quantum leap for WeConnect during 2020? Well, we've got a new database. Joined with SAP Ariba, we've got an amazing database. And what that does, this new platform, is it allows women to find each other globally. If you're registered on the database, you can search for other women-owned businesses in the network. You can find, the corporates can find you directly. Our corporate members will be putting their RFPs online directly so the women can apply directly. What does that mean? It means quicker access to the women. It means quicker access to the corporates. And it also means that our corporates are not focusing on the country that they may be sitting in. So one of the things that happened during COVID is that all of us suddenly were scrambling. Where do we find masks? Where do we find sanitizers? What else do we have? What's out there in the market? A number of our women did amazing pivots in their businesses, did research, and suddenly were great suppliers of those products. And they were able to work with their own client base to provide those services. So we had corporates who said, okay, if a woman-owned business can supply us these products in South Africa, why can't they supply them in Ghana and in Ethiopia for us? Because they're already on our database. The wonderful thing that we must then take is the women-owned businesses in South Africa must then partner with the women in Ghana and Ethiopia and provide the services. Again, scale. We don't want this one order, we want multiple orders. So WeCommunity is a great place for women to find each other and scale. What else have we learned during COVID? We've learned that we can do all our training and all our connecting online. Procter & Gamble, one of our members, came to us early in June and said, we have to continue with our training programs. And we pivoted the class of 2020 and did an online training program. 10 webinars, 10 virtual coaching sessions, 3 modules, all face-to-face with PNG executives. What did we get out of this? We gave women a lot of hope that things just aren't coming to a standstill. 5 women won 40,000 rands as prizes to invest in their businesses during this time. We continue to form new networks of women who found each other and could continue to think about the way forward and be strategic about their pivoting. So that's one of the lessons we've learned is don't stand still no matter what is going on out there. Keep reinventing, keep connecting, keep collaborating. On the word collaboration, we actually started collaboration sessions 3 years ago, hosted by Johnson & Johnson. Some of our women business owners have now created new entities that run side by side to their own businesses where they're doing collaboration. Women in corporate technology, women in agriculture, where they realize to be able to access the big opportunities and opportunities that go beyond country boundaries. They need to work together. Whether you're women in agriculture or women in technology, we need to continue to work together. What's the other thing that we're doing? We're making sure we're expanding into SADC. For Southern Africa and from South Africa, we're growing into SADC. We want to engage with women in SADC. We want our women business owners in South Africa to have close relationships and close collaborations with women in SADC. We want all our corporate members to know that they're women business owners in these areas. So have we had successes? Yes, we've had successes. Have they been enough? No, we need a lot more. The access to markets for women is still highly limited, and we know that. But for me, one of my biggest passions is getting women to understand the power of their purchase. In our network, we encourage women to buy from each other. As business owners, we're continually spending and we're continually buying. We have to turn our spend internally to other women business owners. And we're doing that locally and globally. Are we doing enough of it? Not yet. Are we promoting it? Yes. Do we have champions that have really gone ahead and implemented this? Yes. Some of our women business owners are making sure that if they're buying something, they first look for another woman business owner, whether that's a financial support, whether it's a financier or anybody else. So I'm going to pause there because I know we're going to have a Q&A session later on. Vanessa and I are available on our stand for any questions that you have. But my key comment is, how do we survive this? We have to collaborate. We have to find each other. And women really need to understand the power of our purchasing. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Womanoids, and thank you again for that great presentation. How do we collaborate? Now, to continue this conversation, we are delighted to join by a very special lady, Rachel Wayonke, Managing Director for Solidarity at Eastern Central Africa. She is a climate policy enthusiast and sustainable development professional with over 10 years experience in developing and managing impact-driven development projects across sub-Saharan Africa. With an MSc in public policy and human development from Maastricht University and United Nations University, she is passionate about driving positive change for local communities, supporting sustainable supply chain, promoting sustainable livelihoods, and advocating for multi-stakeholder engagement. Let me welcome Madam Rachel Wayonke to present her perspectives from both her personal and organizational. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you, everybody, for actually joining us today. I think at this point, because it's so online and open, I think the first point is to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching this. I know Jean is a very hard act to follow, and she really was able to raise a lot of insightful information. So I think it's a good way to now pivot from what she has been discussing to the kind of work that Solidaridad does globally. Solidaridad is a global civil society organization, so we are not-for-profit, that actively engages and supports fair and sustainable supply chains. With that in mind, it means that the role that we play is really throughout the entire chain, with a clear focus about improving productivity from a production and quality standpoint at a farm level. In addition to that, we're also looking at a market level and the kind of actors that we can be crowding in, such as We Connect and various other institutions, and also working with government to ensure that we are developing an enabling environment for real active agricultural transformation on the continent. So as Jean aptly put it, COVID definitely did turn everything on its head. The way that we looked at global supply chains, the way that we looked at local supply chains have really been switched around. And I think the one thing that all of us are realizing at this point is that we can't only rely on one avenue, and there needs to be a process where we are resetting the value chains and resetting our thinking about the approach towards how we support and improve value chains as a whole. And while I say this, I think it's aptly worth putting that on a continent like Africa, where the average GDP for most African countries is really has agriculture embedded in it, it's worth now seeing how agriculture and agribusiness can be used as a critical conduit for the transformation of the continent, not only for our own security, from a food security standpoint, but also from an economic growth standpoint. And with that kind of potential, it's worth now really thinking about what is women's role. What is women's role and how can they actively participate in this approach? So I am going to share a slide. It really is only like 5 takeaways about my thinking around this, and also the kind of work that Solidaridad has been doing to ensure that we are able to ensure that women are actively participating. So as a whole, the reset process and how we're looking at it is really looking at it from the 5 takeaways. So one, we are reflecting really that value addition, value creation is really key for a supportive business ecosystem. So not only is it worth now participating a lot more downstream towards the value chain, but how are we able to now elevate ourselves into different levels, whether it's agro-processing, whether it's being service providers, and how are we really creating a supportive business ecosystem for the agriculture sector? With this kind of situation, it creates a very large opportunity for women to play a critical role in that. It offers us the opportunity to sort of reinvest and reset the way that we look at it and use the opportunities that are available to allow or engage and bring in women businesses or women-owned and women-led businesses and support them to sort of innovate, develop new competencies and access new markets. And with that, we are sort of reframing our thinking around how do we see women participating and engaging within value chains. A substantial amount of policies previously were really looking at more farm gate activities, more production level activities, more farming level activities. So I think part of the reframing that we're really looking at is how can we now place a lot of these competent women in different levels of the value chain. Another aspect that we're looking at is really the repositioning, yes? And supporting engagement in the supply chain really exposes businesses to domestic and international markets and the benefits that accrue from a process like that. So whether it's transfer of technology, transfer of knowledge, or other attributed effects, really that positioning in itself could create catalytic transformative solutions that are able to solve some of the continent's problems. I was in an Agra session actually this week, and I know one of the presenters mentioned something like it will probably cost about $180 billion to solve the food security problem alone in the continent. So how are we engaging in this process, and how are we ensuring that there's no organization, no business, no enterprise that's being left behind in that process? In addition to that, I think as we reposition and reframe, a large aspect of it should also really be going towards how we're looking at our rewards and how we're looking at how we incentivize engagement. I find that being an agri-entrepreneur or an entrepreneur alone or running a business is probably one of the more challenging aspects of it. And similar to what Jean mentioned in terms of how we need to not actively only participate, but also collaborate. And I find that potentially creating incentives that push enterprises to be able to participate and collaborate together within value chains could also be the conduit to ensure that we are able to increase our impact and also increase scale. So as a whole, coupling all of that and ensuring that women are playing a significant role in those processes is going to be essential and key in a real transformation on the continent. And I think lastly, the way I was looking at it in terms of reshaping, with the Africa Free Trade Agreement, with the opportunities around intra-trade, we really are able to capitalize on specific opportunities that are available out there for women. And intra-Africa trade really presents that. And not only from a security standpoint for the continent, but also towards economic prosperity. It also opens us up to different other opportunities. And I think developing that enabling environment that's able to create that opportunity to develop catalytic and transformative solutions is really going to be essential. And with the requirements for new products, new services to be developed, there's really no reason why women as a whole cannot really participate in this same space. And I think the idea is within this space is moving now away from theoretical approaches to how we do gender mainstreaming, but really thinking about how we are engaging women in real economic empowerment. And what are we as a whole, as a collective, as people within the sector, as people with similar goals, what can we do to contribute towards that space, taking into account that gender norms, culture is changing, the continent is changing. I don't think I ever thought I'd be able to be doing a TED Talks like this online. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I think with regards to the way that we frame it, is really thinking about reinventing the process and trying to see how we can not only build back better, which is the core slogan around COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 recovery, but also build back very boldly and better. Because we can't say that the current system works effectively. So let's be bold, let's be innovative, and really let's try and see how we can reset global and Africa value chains. Similar to Jean, I'm aware that there'll be a Q&A, so I won't take up too much of your time, but I do look forward to interacting with you during the Q&A session and really trying to see if we can find innovative solutions together to solve some of the problems on the continent. Thank you, everybody. Back to you, Maureen.
For that great presentation, and I'd like to say, let's reflect, reframe, reposition, reward, and reshape as we collaborate. Thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us. Next, we have a great lady. Help me welcome Ngeri Kimoto. Ngeri Kimoto is a global development expert in social inclusion, gender, and policy advocacy. Is a global expert and leader in gender transformation and supply chains and policies. Terry has more than 10 years experience in placing gender knowledge and practice in socioeconomic aspects, specialist in engendering voluntary sustainability standards for increased market access and private sector business development. Developer of various gender and intersectionality tools, training curricula, advocacy materials, checklists, and results frameworks. Experts in co-creating inclusive transports and as well as grassroots engagement strategies. Is a team leader for Solidaridad Network Gender Experts and former civil society advisor to UN Women in Kenya. Welcome and Jerry Timoto to give us her perspective on the topic today. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I think for me is to further delve into the conversation by evoking 3 questions that can take us to a pathfinding of solutions. And of course, this almost gets or merges with the presentation from Jean and Rachel. I'll not be presenting slides, but what I would like us to do is to just pound around 3 questions so that then we can recreate a session of where we are bringing in dialogue. And the first one, without further ado, is how best can we understand local and global value chain from a gender perspective? Because what we would like to get out is to bring women to the forefront. But before we can bring them to the forefront, there is need to understand how these local and global value chains work from a gender perspective. And from an African context, we understand that we live in a patriarchal society in which we have gender relations and gender-specific constraints and opportunity that shape the women's life, and therefore, by extension, they also shape how women do businesses or how they even engage with the whole entrepreneurial aspect. So therefore, it is critical that we reflect and re-examine gender relation and the very specific gender constraints and opportunity, and try to see what can we tap onto already when we look at the opportunities that are existing with these COVID situation, and therefore then try to find what are the basic constraints that the women are facing in advancing their own lives from an economic point of view, as well as their own businesses. And then from there, try to recreate and also co-create solutions with them. I think the next evoking question that I would like to put on the floor is, what are the major challenges that we've seen during this COVID situation when it comes to the development of the local value chains? And I think what we can attest from the research studies is that because of the commercialization of some of these value chains, especially those that are related to food crops, we've seen women being excluded slowly from this value chain because of those aspects that are related to gender relations. And what I mean by this is that when it comes to the issue of access and control and power decision making, then you find when the value chain becomes a very high-end value chain in terms of gains in economic value, then the women tend to disappear and become workers in the very same value chain that they had dominated. So I think that the question around there is, how can we better support women and women businesses in the light of these transformative agendas, and at the same time, owing to the fact that there are curfews and lockdowns that also prohibit mobility of women. So therefore, trying to assess how do we reposition these women in these local and global value chains in terms of their market interaction and engagement. For me, I see a clear points in terms of what I would call market uberization. What do I mean by this? I looking at what the business model are around Uber, we could still adopt it together with the women, of course, because there's nothing about the women without them. And through those, through digital platform, bring the market and help women to be key market players through this Uberization of markets. And what we mean is that we bring the market closer to the customers, and this is done by the women, and therefore the role that women were previously playing by building these big stores, which of course, as we know that by a certain time they need to close the stores and go home, and of course with the restriction of people keeping the 1.5 meters distances, the stores do not provide for that. But with the digitalized platform in which that the women bring the market to the consumers, we therefore change their roles and also increase their visibility and increase their market share, and they also become such drivers of economic elevation in the entire country. And also we try to bridge these market gaps between the demand and the supply. The last but not least of my evoking question is built on the premise that when she trades, we all benefit. But I think at this point, we need to ask ourselves, what are the preconditions that we need for this trade to happen? And of course, looking at what are the success factors and to sustain growth for these women and women businesses. And this is where we need to relook at the enabling social policy environment. And this, for me, it is critical to put social in front of the policy environment, because as I open the stage by saying, the Africa society is set up through patriarchal gender norms and social norms. So therefore, we cannot just look at policy as a whole by looking at them and divorcing them from what happens in our environment, in the sense that there are gender and social norms that are reproduced through these policies. And therefore, there is need for us to look at policy from a gender lens to try and understand what are those intrinsic things that could be embedded in a policy, but could be a barrier to the success of these women. And when I mean about the success of these women, I'm looking at the issues of access to financial resources. I'm looking at issues to do with participation in some of these policy and advocacy elements. I'm looking at opportunities for these women to trade. I'm looking at the opportunities for these women to be business owners and register their businesses in such a way that it is suitable and feasible for them. So therefore, we have to do the back and the front, and the back being the household gender dynamics will have to change to enable women to thrive, because at the end of the day, they are within a social framework and a social environment called a family. And within that, we need to create those enabling environments there, as well as within a larger sphere, which is the meso and macro spheres levels, through our policy mechanism. I do not want to take so much of your time. I would like to stop there, but I would like us to engage on those three reflective, evoking questions of how best can we understand local and global value chain from a gender perspective, so that we take ourselves to a pathfinding of solution, and how can we better support women and women businesses in light of curfew and lockdowns. And then from there, when we talk about, we need to take this agenda even further and argue that when she trades and benefits, how best, or what are the preconditions that we can set to support successful and sustainable growth of women and women-owned businesses. Thank you, and I hand over to Maureen.
Thank you very much, Gary, for those great insights, looking at the three key questions you try to address. Thank you very much. The key takeaway from that I found very interesting is the digitization, the role of women? How do we increase the market share for women? How do we give them visibility? And how do we reposition them? Thank you very much. And we're going to move on to the next level where we will be talking to these great women leaders with almost 70 years of experience in the marketplace, the kind of experiences they have and the power they wield. And they're going to answer our questions for us. Join us as we take questions from the audience and also some important perspectives. Thank you. Welcome.
The beautiful thing about technology and doing things live is that you get to see exactly what's happening backstage as we make these things happen. I think we've had a wonderful, rich conversation as we navigate different countries. I'm looking at this panel and I'm seeing that we're getting a perspective, not just from Southern Africa. We've got East Africa in the room. We've got West Africa in the room. And all of you have given some rich perspectives about the possibilities. If these possibilities are around and we've seen these challenges, why are we not doing things differently? I mean, sometimes it boggles my mind that we are where we are when we know the solutions. What are the fundamental constructs that are preventing us for effecting this change that seems so obvious? And in the spirit of conversation, as opposed to panel and directing it to each one of you, I'd like for you to bring on board your individual perspective. Jean, I will start with you, followed by Rachel, and then perhaps Jerry. What needs to change? What is it that, if we know all this, and we're clearly not stupid, and we're clearly, we've thought about this, it's there. What is preventing this from happening? It boggles my mind.
My perspective, and maybe I'm not speaking on behalf of WeConnect. I really believe as women, we still don't take our power.
So I think Jean is having some technical difficulty. So let me just jump in so I can give my perspective on your question, Rehema, until Jean is able to come online. And I think from me, I think a lot of the attitude that we have around some of these issues is really like the teapot that has the broken handle. So rather than replacing the entire teapot, we try to glue the handle back. It breaks next week. It doesn't last a month. And I think really resetting the entire process and rethinking about how we address some of these issues is the thing that's going to be key. We need to now say that this teapot is completely broken. And because of that, we need to have a more gender smart approach towards the way we invest, the way that we look at women's roles, women's contributions, and also try and really support those compelling business cases that allow for transformation. And I think that's one of probably some of the key things we should really be looking at in a situation like that.
I think you raised some very interesting points, and I also will go to the prefix that you bring into this conversation. We need to. How many years are we going to be speaking about what needs to happen, as opposed to what can happen? Where is the evidence of the change that we want to effect? Is it that women are saying, and in women's spaces and in development spaces, we're saying there's a need for somebody to come into the space before it happens? What is preventing women from being that change that we want to see? And I think, Jean, you started to allude to women's agency and exercising thereof. And I'd like you to continue on that vein so that we have this perspective, because I think we have to challenge ourselves in these spaces where we keep giving us a similar narrative, which is a bit problematic, that almost seems as if we are not the agents of the change we want to see. Jean.
I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I mean, I started by saying, really for me, I think as women, we don't take the power. I really believe we're still waiting for the fairy godmother syndrome. Often it's a fairy godfather syndrome, that the solutions are going to come from elsewhere. And we have to be the ones who have the solutions. I mean, I loved the presentations of my co-presenters, and I would certainly love to engage with them more. But we know the challenges, and we've known them for a long time. When do we actually start saying, this is the solution? one great solution I'd like to put on the table. We talked about investment and access to finance. As women, we must become the angel investors. We must be the ones who create the banks. And I say that because I know it's starting to happen. There are a number of women that have actually come together and they've started women-owned angel investment companies. They've started women-owned financing companies. I'm part of an angel investment group that's come together, 20 professional women who said, you know, let's invest in women-owned businesses because we know there's a problem there. So we've got to do that. We know where the corporates want businesses. So they want businesses in logistics and agriculture and other areas we talked about. How do we as women collaborate to come together? Rahima, let's buy a farm. And, you know, in Njeri, let's me and you buy the trucks and let's find those markets and actually do it. And I really believe our conversations going forward have to be about what are we doing? You know, are we spending our money 90% on women-owned businesses? Because until we do that, we can't expect anybody else to do that.
I mean, I love what you're saying. I mean, because we're sitting in a space, particularly as Africans, with what they're touting is the greatest stimulus package on the African continent. And it bears for us to ask the question, particularly when they tout beautiful big numbers that I've never seen in I've never seen a bank vault with those kind of numbers. But when you tell me the $6 trillion, I'm sitting back and saying, yeah, money. Where are the women participating in that? What is the amount that's actually going to end up in women's hands? Too often we hear about stimulus packages, we hear about development agendas. For many years, we've been hearing about the efforts by multinational organizations, by civil society organizations to work with women, to develop startups. I cannot imagine how many startups have been incentivized. And I'm just sitting back and asking, where's the scale up? Where's the growth in that? And so how do we take this conversation beyond an appreciation that we are going to start African women businesses and we're going to start scaling them up? And I think the real question here is, how do we start investing in that scaling up journey? Because for too long, it's almost as if we are justifying this notion of starting up and keeping small. How do we go big? And I think we should start collaborating in terms of that. But Njeri, I would like you to just weigh in on this. What is it that needs to happen? I remember in the briefing session around this, and you were quite animated, particularly on the policy environment. I mean, what do you have to say about that? We've got great policies, we've got great documents. What's going wrong? Njeri, you here? Seems like I've lost Njeri a little bit, or she's unmuted or she's on silent, but I think we definitely can. Njeri, are you back?
While she's coming on, can I say about policies? Africans were amazing on writing policies. We have a lot of our governments have large numbers of female representation in government, and yet we're still not mobilizing them. So again, we have the answers. How do we get there? In some ways, I mean, I came from the CSIR and those kind of organizations where we spent hours and trillions of hours putting together policy. Sometimes we need to throw them in the bin and just say, this is what we need. And let's do it. Let's just do it. Really, we do. Agriculture, we know the answers. Women have been doing agriculture forever, but we do it in small scale. So Solidad needs to come up with a plan that says we are going to join groups of 100 women at a time to farm together, you know, and then we connect and says, we'll find you the buyers. And then, you know, and that's the way I think we need to go forward. We've almost got to scare the males into knowing that we're working together. Womenomics and We Connect are working together. And everybody else, they're working together. They're talking together. And they're planning and they're putting money together. You know, we better get involved too. And then they will get involved too.
I mean, this is a rich conversation, and I really wish we had more time, and we apologize for the glitches that we had, and we do have to wrap up. But I mean, it's clear. You've already said it, Jean, and I think the other conversations have laid the foundations for Womenomics to work together, Solidaridad to work together, for We Connect to work together, because the future of Africa is in African women's hands, and we are going to go out there and take it. We're not going to have these talk shops anymore. We're going to have these do shops, and looking forward to making that happen. Thank you very much to our guests, to our host, Maureen from Ghana. We had some challenges with sound, but it's been a fantastic session, and we look forward to connecting. Goodbye, and please go to the next session. We look forward to seeing you there.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rahima.
Thank you,
Always
everybody.
wonderful. Always wonderful. Nice to meet you, Rachel.
Have a good day, guys.
Have a good day.